They say honor is the highest virtue, that a man who keeps his word to the world is worth more than one who keeps his promises to you. That duty to family and community should outweigh love, and perhaps they are right. Perhaps the world functions better when people sacrifice personal happiness for collective good. But I learned that honor can be another word for cowardice. That choosing duty over love can be choosing comfort over courage. That leaving someone is easier when you dress it in noble language. Call it sacrifice instead of abandonment. Call it honor instead of fear. And he left me after promising we would run. After planning our escape in whispered detail. After swearing that nothing mattered more than us. And he did it for honor, he said. Did it because his family needed him, because the community expected him to stay. Because running would shame his name. And I understood in that moment that I had never been as important as his reputation. That love was negotiable when set against respectability. That promises made in darkness could be broken in daylight without consequence. And he left me to face alone what we had created together. Left me to carry the weight of choices we both made. Left me to burn for sins we both committed. And he kept his honor, married appropriately, lived well, slept peacefully. And I paid the price for both of us. And this is my testimony, my confession. My truth about what honor costs when someone else is forced to pay for it. My name is Temperance Wade, and I was 18 when I fell in love with Jonathan Whitfield. 18 when I learned that being loved is not the same as being chosen. That promises and actions are not always aligned. That a man can mean what he says when he says it and still walk away when walking away becomes convenient. And Jonathan was the oldest son of one of Salem's founding families. Was meant to inherit land and position. Was groomed from birth to be respectable. And I was the daughter of a tanner. Was from a family that worked with dead things. With blood and hide and the parts of animals no one wanted to see. And we smelled of our trade no matter how much we scrubbed. And this made us necessary but not respected, useful but not welcome. And I should never have been noticed by someone like Jonathan. Should never have been more than invisible to him. And perhaps that was why he noticed me. Because I was forbidden not by rule but by unspoken hierarchy. Because loving me was rebellion, was choosing something real over something arranged. And I loved him with the intensity of someone who knows their love is borrowed time. Who understands that every moment is stolen. Every touch is temporary. Every promise is made against the current of what the world expects. We met in secret for a year. Met in the forest beyond his family's land. In the abandoned mill where no one went. In the spaces between their world and mine. And he told me he loved me. Told me he could not imagine a life without me. Told me we would find a way. And I believed him because I needed to believe him. Because love at 18 feels like truth even when it is really just intensity. And we made plans, whispered plans. Plans to run to Boston or New York or somewhere large enough that no one would know our names. Somewhere we could be together without shame. Somewhere his family's expectations and my family's reputation would not matter. And he promised. He promised so many times that I stopped counting. Promised we would leave before the autumn. Promised he just needed to arrange his affairs. Promised he was working on securing funds. Promised he simply needed time. And I gave him time. Gave him months of waiting while our secret grew more complicated. Grew from just love into something that could not be hidden much longer. I knew I was with child in the late summer. Knew it with the certainty that comes from knowing your own body. From feeling changes that were undeniable. And I told Jonathan with fear and hope mixed together. Fear because this complicated everything. Hope because surely now he would have to act. Would have to follow through on his promises because a child could not exist in the spaces between worlds. Could not be kept secret. Could not wait for convenient timing. And he held me when I told him. Held me and said we would leave immediately. Said this changed everything. Said he would arrange our departure within the week. And I believed him because I had to believe him, because the alternative was unthinkable. And I waited. Waited for him to come with the plan, with the funds, with the courage to finally choose me over everything else. He came a week later and I could see it in his face before he spoke. Could see that something had changed. That the man who held me was different from the man who had made promises. And he said we needed to talk. Said things were more complicated than he thought. Said his father had arranged a marriage. A good marriage to a merchant's daughter from Boston. A marriage that would secure his family's position, that would bring them connections and prosperity. And he said he could not refuse, could not dishonor his family by running away, could not throw away everything they had built for him. And I asked about me, asked about the child, asked about the promises he had made. And he said he was sorry, said he had meant every word when he said it, said he loved me still, but love was not enough. Honor demanded he do what was right for his family. Duty required sacrifice. And I understood that the sacrifice he was making was me, was us, was our child. And I asked if honor included abandoning the mother of his child, and he flinched, but he did not change his answer. Said he would provide money, would make sure I was taken care of, would do what he could without revealing his involvement. And I looked at him, and I saw not the man I loved but a stranger. A coward dressed in noble language. A man choosing comfort and calling it duty, and I told him to leave. Told him I did not want his money. Told him that if he left me he should leave completely, should not pretend that financial support made abandonment acceptable. And he left with relief visible in his face. Relief that I had made it easy, that I had not begged or cried or made him feel worse than he already felt. And I watched him walk away, and I understood that I had been a fool. Had believed in something that existed only while it was convenient. Had trusted promises that evaporated when tested against reality. I tried to hide the pregnancy, but hiding becomes impossible. Bodies tell truths that mouths cannot deny. And my family noticed, and the village noticed, and the questions began. Questions about who the father was. About how this had happened. About whether I had been forced or willing, and I said nothing. Kept Jonathan's secret because some part of me still wanted to protect him. Still believed that his choosing honor over me meant something noble even if it destroyed me. And I gave birth alone in the winter. Gave birth to a daughter who lived only 3 days. Lived long enough for me to love her and lose her. Lived long enough to make her death feel like punishment for sins that were mine and Jonathan's both, but that only I would carry. And I buried her in the forest where Jonathan and I had met. Buried her with hands that were still bleeding. Buried her, and I felt something in me break that would never be repaired. And when I returned to the village, I was different, was hollowed out. Was someone who had lost too much to fear losing more. The accusation came in the spring. Came from a girl named Mercy Lewis who claimed I had appeared to her in spectral form. Had tormented her. Had caused her to sicken. And I knew immediately why I was being accused. Knew that carrying a child out of wedlock made you suspect, made you marked, made you someone people could point to when they needed a witch. And I was taken to prison with other accused women. And I waited for trial thinking that perhaps this was easier than living with grief. Perhaps burning was simpler than carrying the weight of Jonathan's betrayal and my daughter's death. And when Jonathan came to the prison, I felt nothing. Not hope or anger or even surprise. Felt only the flat certainty that he was not here to save me but to ensure his own safety. He came with his new wife, came to stand witness at my trial. Came to testify that he had observed strange behavior from me. That he had once seen me in the forest speaking words in an unknown language. That he had suspected I was involved with darkness but had been too frightened to speak earlier. And his wife stood beside him looking righteous and supportive. And I looked at him and I saw it all clearly. Saw that he was testifying to distance himself from me completely. Was creating a narrative where I was always other, always suspicious. Was rewriting our history so that his involvement would be unthinkable. So that no one would ever connect his name with mine. And he was doing it for honor. Was protecting his reputation, his family, his carefully constructed life. And he was sacrificing me to do it. Was condemning me to death to preserve his respectability. And he did it calmly. Did it with the assured voice of someone who believed he was doing the right thing. Who believed protecting his family's name justified destroying me. I was found guilty in less than an hour. Guilty based partly on Jonathan's testimony. Guilty because I was unmarried and had borne a child who died. Guilty because I existed at the intersection of convenience and suspicion. And they sentenced me to hang. And I accepted the sentence with something like relief, because at least hanging had an ending, at least death was honest. Was not dressed up as duty or honor or sacrifice, was simply what it was. And Jonathan watched the verdict with his wife's hand in his, and I saw relief in his face. Relief that this problem would be permanently solved, that I would be gone and with me any evidence of his involvement, any threat to his carefully maintained honor. The night before my execution, Jonathan came to my cell alone, came in the darkness when guards could be bribed to look away, and he said he needed to explain, needed me to understand why he had testified, needed me to know he had no choice, that his family's reputation depended on complete separation from me, that testifying was the only way to ensure no one would ever connect us. And I listened to him justify his betrayal, listened to him explain how condemning me to death was actually the honorable thing, was protecting his family, was serving the greater good. And I understood that he had convinced himself this was true, had built a story where he was not villain but victim, where circumstances forced his hand, where everything he did was necessary rather than chosen. And I looked at him and I said the only words I had left. I said, you chose honor. You chose your name, you chose your comfort. And you will live with those choices and call them sacrifices and sleep peacefully believing you did what was right. And I will die and you will forget me. Will tell your children stories about the witch trials, will position yourself as someone who helped root out evil. And you will never acknowledge that you destroyed someone who loved you. Never admit that honor can be another word for cowardice. And he left then, left without attempting to defend himself further, left knowing I saw him truly and hating me for it. And I was alone again with the certainty that love had never been enough for him, that I had never been worth the discomfort of honesty, had never mattered more than his reputation. They came for me at dawn, and I walked to the scaffold thinking about Jonathan, about the promises he had made and broken, about the child we had created and I had buried alone, about the way he had transformed abandonment into duty, betrayal into honor, cowardice into sacrifice. And I understood that this was how men like him survived, by building narratives that excused their cruelty, by calling their selfishness service, by sleeping peacefully while others paid for their choices. And I climbed the scaffold and I looked out at the crowd and I saw him there, saw him standing with his wife and his respectability, saw him watching my execution with the same calm he had watched everything else. And I made a choice, made it in the moment before they placed the hood over my head. I spoke loudly enough that everyone could hear, and I named him. Named Jonathan Whitfield as the father of my dead child. Named him as the man who promised to run away with me and chose honor instead. Named him as someone who testified against me to hide his own involvement. And I watched his face go white, watched his wife turn to look at him, watched his carefully constructed world begin to crack. And they silenced me then, pulled the hood down and the lever that ended my voice, but I had spoken, had refused to protect him at the last, had taken his honor with me into death. And perhaps that was victory, perhaps that was all I could do, speak truth before dying. Make sure he paid some price for what he had done. Make sure his name was tainted, even if his life continued. But death was not the end, not in the way I expected. I woke in darkness, woke choking and confused. Woke to find I had been cut down after they declared me dead. Woke to find myself in the care of women who practiced the old ways, who had saved me because they saw injustice and chose to act. And they told me I could return to Salem and try to reclaim some version of life. Or I could stay dead, could disappear, could become someone new. And I chose to stay dead because Temperance Wade had nothing left to live for. But whoever I became next might have something. And I learned from them. Learned the power I had been falsely accused of. Learned that magic was real and could be used to survive, to help others survive, to build something from the ruins of what had been destroyed. I heard years later that Jonathan's marriage had been unhappy, that my words from the scaffold had followed him, that there were always whispers about his first love who he had let die, about the child no one could verify but everyone suspected, about whether his testimony had been truth or self-preservation, and he had lived his life under that cloud, had kept his honor but lost his peace, had maintained his reputation but never escaped the doubt. And his children grew up hearing the story, hearing my name, wondering about the woman their father may have betrayed. And perhaps that was justice. Not his destruction but his discomfort, not revenge but consequence. The understanding that speaking truth had damaged him even if it could not save me. And I took satisfaction in that. Took comfort in knowing that while he had chosen honor and I had been forced to die, I had survived, and he had spent his life slightly less peaceful than he would have been if I had stayed silent, if I had protected him even in death. I am old now, much older than I ever expected to be, older than Jonathan lived to be. And I practice what I was accused of, use it to help women who face what I faced, who are abandoned by men who choose honor over love, who are left to carry consequences alone. And I tell them my story, tell them that speaking truth has power even when truth cannot save you. Tell them that surviving is victory.